The morning my daughter looked at me as if I were a stranger, I noticed something I had never paid attention to before. The tea sitting between us had already gone cold, yet neither of us reached for it. Steam had disappeared long ago, just like the warmth that used to fill our kitchen. She held a folded envelope so tightly that her fingers had turned white. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm, but every word felt heavier than anything I had carried in my 62 years. "I never thought you'd do this to me." Those 7 words stayed in my mind long after she walked out the door. I wanted to call her back. I wanted to ask what she meant. But the look in her eyes stopped me. It wasn't anger. It was disappointment. And somehow, that hurt even more. People often believe trust disappears because of one terrible decision. My experience taught me something different. Trust usually fades one misunderstanding at a time, especially when someone is quietly feeding those misunderstandings every single day. At that moment, though, I had no idea someone else had been writing the story of my life while I wasn't looking. I simply stood there in my small kitchen, listening to the clock above the refrigerator tick louder than I had ever heard before. My name is Margaret. For almost 40 years, my life revolved around one person. My daughter, Emily. After my husband passed away when Emily was only 8 years old, the world became frighteningly quiet. The neighbors visited for a few weeks. Family members promised they would always help. Eventually everyone returned to their own lives. Only Emily and I remained. She was too young to understand why I cried after putting her to bed. I was too determined to let her see how scared I really was. So every morning I smiled. Every evening I worked. Every night I prayed that somehow tomorrow would be easier. Money was always tight. Some weeks I counted every coin before walking into the grocery store. I learned which vegetables were cheapest on Wednesdays. I learned how to repair old clothes instead of replacing them. When Emily needed new school shoes, I told myself mine could survive another winter. They rarely did. But mothers become experts at pretending everything is fine. Emily noticed more than I realized. One rainy afternoon she came home carrying a permission slip for a school trip. She stood quietly by the doorway. "I don't have to go," she whispered. "Why would you say that?" "I know it costs money." I smiled and gently took the paper from her hands. "You'll go." "But..." "You'll go." That night I skipped buying groceries until payday so I could pay for her trip. She never knew. And honestly, I never wanted her to. Love isn't supposed to keep score. Years passed faster than I expected. Emily grew into a thoughtful young woman. She loved reading. She laughed with her whole heart. Whenever she succeeded, she hugged me before celebrating herself. Those moments made every sacrifice worthwhile. Sometimes she'd say, "Mom, when I have a good job, you'll never worry about bills again." I always laughed. "I don't need riches." "What do you need?" "You." She would roll her eyes, smile, and hug me again. Back then, I truly believed nothing could come between us. Looking back now, I realize life rarely breaks families overnight. It starts with tiny cracks. Words left unsaid. Phone calls answered a little later. Visits becoming shorter. Smiles becoming polite instead of genuine. At first, those changes are easy to ignore. I certainly ignored them. Emily found a stable job in another part of the city. I was proud of her. The commute was longer, but she sounded happy. She rented a small apartment close to work. The first weekend after moving, she invited me over. "It's not much," she said nervously. I looked around the tiny apartment. A small dining table. Second-hand furniture. One little plant sitting near the window. "It looks perfect." She smiled with relief. We spent the afternoon assembling shelves and laughing every time we misunderstood the instructions. That day reminded me of when she was little. I drove home with tears in my eyes. Not from sadness. From gratitude. A few months later she introduced me to Daniel. He seemed respectful. Quiet. Polite. He listened more than he spoke. I liked that. During dinner he asked thoughtful questions about my late husband and my work. Emily looked happier than I had seen her in years. As mothers do, I silently thanked God. Maybe life was finally becoming easier for her. Around that same time, someone else quietly entered our lives again. My younger sister, Linda. We had never argued dramatically. We had simply drifted apart. She always chased bigger houses, better neighborhoods, more expensive vacations. None of those things interested me. Still, she suddenly began calling more often. Stopping by with desserts. Offering help I hadn't asked for. At first, I appreciated it. Family is family, after all. Or so I believed. Linda adored Emily. Or at least that's how it appeared. She often invited Emily shopping. Lunch. Weekend outings. Whenever Emily posted pictures online, Linda commented first. My beautiful niece. So proud of you. You deserve the best. Those words sounded loving. I never questioned them. Why would I? One Sunday we all had lunch together. Linda casually looked around my house. You've lived here forever. I smiled. It still feels like home. You should think about selling. I don't want to. The neighborhood isn't what it used to be. I'm comfortable here. Emily stayed unusually quiet during that conversation. I assumed she was simply tired. Now I wonder what she was already hearing behind my back. The following weeks brought small changes. Emily canceled dinner twice. Then 3 times. Whenever I called, she answered politely but seemed distracted. I've just been busy, Mom. I understand. And I truly believed I did. Young people build careers. Relationships grow. Life gets crowded. I reminded myself not to become one of those parents who expected constant attention. Still. The silence grew heavier each week. One evening I baked her favorite apple pie. She had promised she'd visit after work. The pie cooled. Outside, daylight faded into evening. Then darkness settled over the neighborhood. Finally my phone buzzed. I'm sorry, Mom. Something came up. I looked at the untouched pie. It's okay. She sounded relieved. We'll do it next week. Of course. After hanging up, I quietly wrapped each slice in plastic and placed them in the freezer. I lived alone. One pie lasted a very long time. Sometimes loneliness doesn't announce itself loudly. Sometimes it arrives through ordinary things. An empty chair. A second coffee cup that no one uses anymore. A birthday card sitting unopened because you were waiting to celebrate together. Those small moments weighed more than I ever admitted. Then something happened that stayed with me. I visited Emily's apartment without calling first. Not because I wanted to surprise her. Her phone battery had died earlier that day, and I wanted to drop off homemade soup because she had mentioned feeling sick. When she opened the door, surprise crossed her face. Behind her stood Linda. The two of them immediately stopped talking. Oh, Emily said. You have company. Linda smiled too quickly. We were just catching up. Something about the room felt different. Not wrong. Just interrupted. I handed Emily the container. I won't stay. You could have called. I know. I've been really busy. I can see that. She hugged me politely. Politely. My own daughter hugged me like someone greeting a neighbor. As I walked back to my car, I couldn't explain why my chest suddenly felt so heavy. Over the next month, our conversations became shorter. She rarely asked how I was doing anymore. When I mentioned small repairs around the house, she simply nodded. When I told her my knees had been hurting, she changed the subject. Daniel remained kind whenever we met. In fact, there were moments when he looked as though he wanted to say something but stopped himself. At the time, I assumed I was imagining it. Then my birthday arrived. Emily had never forgotten my birthday. Not once. Even during college exams. Even when she had the flu. She always called before breakfast. This year. Morning became afternoon. Afternoon became evening. Nothing. Around 7 o'clock my phone finally rang. "Happy birthday, Mom." Her voice sounded rushed. "Thank you. I'm sorry I'm late." "It's all right. I'll visit soon." "I'd like that." The conversation lasted less than 2 minutes. When the call ended, the house felt larger than ever. I looked at the birthday cake sitting untouched on the table. Just one candle. One slice missing. I had celebrated alone. For the first time in my life. That night, I opened the old photo album I kept beside my bed. There was Emily at 5 years old, covered in flour because we had tried baking cookies together. There she was at 12, proudly holding a science project. Then her graduation picture. Then her first apartment. Page after page reminded me of one simple truth. People don't stop loving each other overnight. So why did it suddenly feel as though my daughter was slowly disappearing from my life? I didn't have an answer. But somewhere, beyond everything I could see, someone else already did. For the next several weeks, I convinced myself that nothing was truly wrong. Whenever friends asked about Emily, I smiled and said she was busy with work. Whenever neighbors mentioned they hadn't seen her car outside my house in a while, I laughed softly and answered, "That's what happens when children grow up." It was easier to protect the story than to admit I no longer understood it. The truth was that every evening, I found myself looking toward the window whenever a car slowed down outside. Every vibration from my phone made my heart race for a second before settling back into disappointment. Loneliness has a strange way of becoming routine. One morning, I opened my pantry and realized I had been buying enough groceries for 2 people without even thinking about it. There was Emily's favorite cereal. Her favorite tea. The crackers she always ate while reading on my couch. I stood there holding the box of cereal and quietly placed it back on the shelf. For the first time, I bought groceries only for myself. It should have been a simple change. Instead, it felt like admitting defeat. A few days later, my neighbor, Mrs. Carter, knocked on my door carrying a basket of fresh tomatoes from her garden. "You've been awfully quiet lately," she said. "I've just been keeping busy." She smiled kindly. "You know, pretending to be busy and actually being happy aren't always the same thing." I laughed politely, but her words stayed with me long after she left. Sometimes strangers notice our pain before family does. That weekend, Emily finally agreed to have lunch with me. I arrived at the little cafe 15 minutes early. Old habit. I always hated making anyone wait. She walked in wearing a tired expression, checking her phone before she even sat down. "I'm sorry," she sighed. "Work has been crazy." "I understand." For a few minutes, we talked about ordinary things. The weather. Traffic. Her office. I kept waiting for the conversation to feel natural again. It never did. Then she suddenly asked a question that caught me completely off guard. "Mom, have you updated your will recently?" I blinked. "My will?" She nodded. "I was just wondering." I smiled. "That's an unusual question over lunch." She looked uncomfortable. "I know. I was just curious. I haven't changed anything in years." "Oh." She stirred her coffee without drinking it. Neither of us spoke for nearly a minute. Finally, she stood. "I have to get back." The entire lunch had lasted less than 30 minutes. As I watched her leave, I couldn't stop wondering why a conversation about family had somehow turned into one about paperwork. That evening, I called my attorney's office. Not because I planned to change anything. I simply wanted to confirm where my documents were stored. The assistant politely explained that everything remained exactly as I had signed it years ago. I thanked her and hung up. It seemed like an ordinary phone call. Yet something inside me refused to settle. A week later, Linda stopped by unexpectedly. She carried a bag of pastries and smiled as though nothing in the world could possibly be wrong. "You've lost weight," she said. "I've been eating less. You shouldn't spend so much time alone." "I'm managing." She looked around my living room before lowering her voice. "You know, Emily worries about you." "Does she?" "She thinks you're becoming forgetful." I frowned. "Forgetful?" Linda nodded sympathetically. "She didn't want to upset you." I felt a strange chill. "I've never forgotten anything important." "I'm just telling you what she said." I stared at my sister. Something about her tone felt rehearsed. Carefully measured. Almost as though she wanted me to react. Instead, I simply asked, "Why didn't Emily tell me herself?" Linda sighed dramatically. "Because she loves you." Then she changed the subject. Before leaving, she hugged me tightly. "You should think about the future." I stood at my front door long after her car disappeared. The future. Everyone suddenly seemed very interested in my future. No one seemed interested in my present. That night, I barely slept. I replayed every conversation from the past few months. Every cancelled visit. Every awkward silence. Every strange question. None of them made sense on their own. Together, they formed a picture I couldn't quite see. Like a puzzle missing its centerpiece. A few days later, Daniel called me. It surprised me because he rarely phoned directly. "Hello, Margaret." "Hello, Daniel." His voice sounded hesitant. "I just wanted to check how you're doing." "I'm fine." There was a pause. "Are you sure?" I smiled even though he couldn't see it. I'm old enough to know when someone doesn't believe my answer. He chuckled softly. "I just wanted to ask." "That's kind of you." Another silence. Then he quietly said, "Please don't give up on Emily." Before I could ask what he meant, he changed the subject. We talked about the weather for another minute before ending the call. Afterward, I sat staring at my phone. Those 6 words echoed through my mind. Please don't give up on Emily. Why would he say that? Had she told him something? Or was he trying to tell me something he couldn't say directly? The following Sunday, I attended church alone. Emily had promised she'd meet me there. She never arrived. After the service, several people asked where she was. I answered with the same practiced smile. She's working. It became my favorite lie. Not because it fooled anyone. Because it protected my daughter from questions she wasn't there to answer. On my way home, I stopped at the local market. As I reached for a loaf of bread, I heard familiar laughter. Emily. She stood near the fruit section. Linda was beside her. They looked relaxed. Comfortable. Happy. For a brief second, I smiled. Then I noticed something. Emily's face changed the moment she saw me. The smile disappeared. Not slowly. Instantly. Almost as if she'd been caught doing something wrong. Mom, she said. I didn't know you came here. I just needed bread. Linda answered before Emily could continue. We were discussing some family matters. I looked at my daughter. What family matters? Emily avoided my eyes. Nothing important. Nothing important. The words hurt more than I expected. Once upon a time, I had been the first person she told everything. Now, conversations about our family happened without me. That evening, I opened the old wooden box where I kept family photographs, birthday cards, and letters. I wasn't searching for anything specific. I simply wanted to remember a time when life felt uncomplicated. As I sorted through the papers, a folded note slipped onto the floor. It was written by Emily when she was 15. Mom, thank you for believing in me even when I don't believe in myself. I promise I'll always trust you. I read those words over and over. Then I quietly folded the paper and returned it to the box. Promises made by children are honest. Life is what changes them. Winter arrived early that year. The evenings became darker. My heating bill climbed higher than expected. I found myself wearing 2 sweaters indoors instead of turning the temperature up. Not because I couldn't pay. Because I had spent decades avoiding unnecessary expenses. Some habits never leave you. One evening, as I balanced my monthly budget at the kitchen table, I noticed the silence again. No phone ringing. No television. Just the sound of my pencil moving across old receipts. I suddenly realized I had become an expert at stretching money. What I didn't know how to stretch anymore was hope. Then came another unexpected conversation. Mrs. Carter waved me over while I was watering the flowers. I hope you don't mind me asking, she said carefully. Of course not. I saw your daughter a few days ago. You did? She looked upset. My heart tightened. Was she all right? Mrs. Carter hesitated. She asked if you'd been forgetting appointments lately. I stared at her. She asked that? Yes. I told her you seemed perfectly fine. I thanked her and slowly walked back inside. This time, I couldn't dismiss it as coincidence. 2 different people. The same strange concern. Forgetfulness. Confusion. Why? Who had planted that idea? That night, I looked around my house with different eyes. Every drawer was organized. Every bill had been paid on time. Every important document sat neatly labeled in the filing cabinet. Nothing about my life suggested confusion. Yet someone was quietly painting that picture. The question was, who benefited from it? 3 days later, Emily finally called. Her voice trembled slightly. Mom, can we talk tomorrow? Of course. At your house. I'll make tea. She hesitated. Okay. After we hung up, I noticed something unusual. She hadn't said, I love you. For years, those words had ended every phone call. This time, there had only been silence. I barely slept. Somewhere deep inside, I knew tomorrow would change everything. I simply didn't know whether it would break what little remained between us. Or finally reveal the truth that had been hiding in plain sight. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. The house was silent except for the familiar hum of the refrigerator and the faint sound of rain tapping against the kitchen window. I made 2 cups of tea out of habit, then stared at the second cup until I realized it would grow cold before anyone touched it. At exactly 10 o'clock, Emily's car pulled into the driveway. She stepped out slowly, holding a large envelope against her chest. For a brief moment, I almost ran outside to hug her. Instead, I waited by the front door. When she walked inside, she looked around the house as though seeing it for the first time. It still smells like cinnamon, she said quietly. I baked yesterday. She nodded but didn't smile. Neither of us sat down immediately. There were too many unspoken words standing between us. Finally, I gestured toward the kitchen table. Let's sit. She placed the envelope on the table but kept one hand resting on it. Her eyes looked tired. Not angry. Just exhausted. After several seconds of silence, she finally spoke. Mom. I need to ask you something. You can ask me anything. She swallowed hard. Please tell me the truth. I always will. She looked directly into my eyes. Did you change your will and remove me? For a second, I honestly thought I had misunderstood her. What? She repeated the question, this time with tears beginning to fill her eyes. Did you decide I wasn't going to inherit the house? I stared at her in complete disbelief. No. You didn't? No. I was told. Her voice faded. I leaned forward. Who told you that? She looked down at the envelope instead of answering. My heart began beating faster. Emily. She slowly opened the envelope and removed several photocopied pages. I was shown these. I recognized the papers immediately. They looked like copies of legal documents. But something felt wrong. The formatting was slightly different. One signature looked unusually dark. One page number didn't match the others. I had handled enough paperwork over the years to notice small details. Where did these come from? I asked calmly. She hesitated. I promised I wouldn't say. I reached across the table but stopped before touching her hand. Emily. My voice remained steady. If someone truly cares about us, they don't ask us to keep secrets that destroy a family. She closed her eyes. For nearly a minute, neither of us spoke. Then, in barely more than a whisper, she answered. Aunt Linda. The room suddenly felt colder. Emily wiped away a tear before continuing. She told me you met with an attorney months ago. I did call my attorney. She looked up sharply. So it's true? Yes. I knew it. But I never changed my will. Her expression froze. I only called to confirm where my documents were kept after you unexpectedly asked me about them. She blinked. You called because... I asked? Yes. She looked genuinely confused. Linda had never mentioned that part. Emily slowly pushed the copied papers toward me. Aunt Linda said she had seen the new documents. I carefully examined each page. Within seconds, more inconsistencies became obvious. This isn't right. What do you mean? The signature isn't mine. She frowned. It looks exactly like yours. It looks similar. I pointed toward one line. I always write my middle initial. She looked closer. It wasn't there. I pointed to another section. My attorney always numbers every page. These pages weren't numbered correctly. Then another detail caught my attention. The date. The meeting supposedly happened on a Sunday. I smiled sadly. My attorney's office has never opened on Sundays. Emily stared at the paper as if seeing it for the first time. I never noticed. Because you trusted the person who gave it to you. Her eyes filled with tears again. I thought you didn't trust me anymore. For several long moments, she couldn't stop crying. Not loudly. Just quietly. The kind of tears that come when someone realizes they've been carrying the wrong burden for far too long. I thought you believed I cared more about money than about you. I gently shook my head. I've never believed that. But Aunt Linda said you were disappointed in me. She never told me that. She said you felt Daniel was changing me. I sighed. I barely know Daniel well enough to think that. Emily covered her face. Oh, Mom. For the first time in months, I reached across the table and held her hand. She didn't pull away. Once the tears settled, we began talking honestly. Really talking. The way we used to. She admitted that over the past year, Linda had gradually become someone she confided in. Whenever Emily and I had a small misunderstanding, Linda always seemed ready with advice. At first, the advice sounded caring. Then it became strangely specific. Your mother doesn't tell you everything. She's preparing for the future without including you. Older people sometimes hide financial decisions. Each sentence planted another tiny seed of doubt. None of them sounded outrageous on their own. Together, they slowly changed the way Emily interpreted everything I did. If I missed a phone call, it became proof I was hiding something. If I looked tired, it meant I was keeping secrets. If I avoided talking about money, it became suspicious instead of ordinary. Linda hadn't forced Emily to distrust me. She had simply taught her to question every innocent moment. As Emily spoke, another memory suddenly returned to me. The conversation about selling my house. The repeated questions about my finances. The strange comments about forgetfulness. None of those moments had been random. They had been carefully connected. Someone had been building a story. One conversation at a time. "Mom," Emily said quietly. "I think I owe you another apology." "You don't owe me anything yet." I believed her. "You believed someone you loved." "I should have asked you." I smiled sadly. "Yes." She lowered her head. I was afraid of the answer. Just then, her phone vibrated. The screen lit up with one name. Aunt Linda. Emily looked at me. I looked back. Neither of us spoke. The phone continued ringing. Finally, Emily answered. "Hi." Linda sounded cheerful. "Did you talk to your mother?" Emily glanced toward me before answering. "Yes." "And?" There was a long pause. Emily chose her words carefully. "We're talking." Linda's voice immediately changed. "Be careful what she tells you." Emily frowned. "What does that mean?" "I've known your mother much longer than you have." Those words hung in the air. Emily slowly placed the phone on speaker without saying anything. Linda continued. "She knows how to make people feel guilty." I felt my heart sink. Not because of the accusation. Because my own sister truly believed I couldn't hear her. Then Linda added something neither of us expected. "If she refuses to sell that house, everything becomes much harder." Emily and I exchanged a quick glance. "Harder for whom?" Emily spoke softly. "Why would she need to sell it?" There was a brief silence. Then Linda recovered. "I just mean, maintenance is expensive." But something in her voice had changed. She sounded nervous. Very nervous. The call ended only a minute later. Neither of us moved. Neither of us spoke. The silence itself had become an answer. That afternoon, Emily insisted on driving me to my attorney's office. "I need to hear it myself," she said. "I understand." The attorney welcomed us warmly. After reviewing the official file, he confirmed exactly what I had said. Nothing had been changed. Nothing had been removed. The original documents had remained untouched for years. He also examined the photocopies Emily had received. He frowned almost immediately. "These aren't copies from our office." Emily's face turned pale. "So, they're fake?" "I can't say where they came from," he answered carefully, "but they certainly didn't come from here." Emily closed her eyes. One quiet tear rolled down her cheek. Not because she had lost something. Because she had finally realized how much she had almost lost. As we left the office, she reached for my hand. For the first time in many months. She held it the way she used to when she was a little girl. But although the truth had begun to bring us back together, one question still remained unanswered. Why had Linda gone to such extraordinary lengths to separate a mother from her daughter? And what was she planning next? The drive home from the attorney's office was quieter than any conversation Emily and I had shared in months. She kept both hands on the steering wheel, her eyes fixed on the road. Every now and then, she opened her mouth as if she wanted to say something, but no words came out. I didn't rush her. Some truths need room to settle before they can be spoken. When we pulled into my driveway, she turned off the engine but didn't unlock the doors. "I'm ashamed," she whispered. I looked at my daughter, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't see the distance that had grown between us. I saw the little girl who used to cry whenever she thought she had disappointed me. "Everyone can be misled," I said gently. "What matters is what we do after we learn the truth." She wiped her eyes. "I want to fix this." I nodded. "Then we'll fix it together." Over the next few days, we didn't spend our energy arguing about the past. Instead, we focused on facts. Emily wrote down every conversation she could remember with Linda. The dates. The places. The The things that had been said. I searched through old folders and calendars. One by one, we noticed a pattern. Every time Linda had encouraged Emily to question me, she had also asked about something else. The house. My savings. My insurance. My will. At first, the questions seemed casual. Looking back, they formed a map. She hadn't been interested in my happiness. She had been interested in my assets. Daniel came over one evening after work. The moment he stepped inside, he looked relieved to see Emily and me sitting together. "I've been hoping for this," he admitted. Emily looked at him with surprise. "You knew something was wrong?" He sighed. "I didn't know everything." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because every time I questioned your aunt's stories, she convinced you I simply didn't understand your family." He looked at me apologetically. "I'm sorry I stayed quiet." I smiled. "Sometimes people stay silent because they're trying to keep peace." He lowered his head. "I've learned that silence can also protect the wrong person." Those words stayed with all of us. A week later, Linda called. Her voice was as cheerful as ever. "I was thinking we should all have dinner together." Emily glanced at me before answering. "That sounds like a good idea." We agreed to meet at my house on Saturday evening. There would be no surprises. No raised voices. Only the truth. Saturday arrived with clear skies and a cool breeze. I cooked a simple dinner: roasted chicken, vegetables, fresh bread, and the apple pie Emily had always loved. This time, I knew she would be there. When Linda arrived, she walked in carrying flowers and wearing her usual confident smile. "You two seem much closer lately," she said as she looked between Emily and me. Emily simply nodded. "We've been talking." Linda's smile tightened for the briefest moment. During dinner, the conversation stayed ordinary. We talked about the weather, the neighborhood, Daniel's work. No one mentioned the past. Not yet. After we finished eating, Emily quietly placed a folder on the table. "Aunt Linda," she said calmly, "I'd like to ask you something." Linda looked puzzled. "Of course. Where did the copies of Mom's New Will come from?" The room became completely silent. Linda blinked. "What do you mean?" Emily opened the folder and laid the photocopies beside the attorney's written statement confirming they were not genuine. "We visited Mom's attorney." Linda's face lost its color. For several long seconds, she said nothing. Then she forced a small laugh. "There must have been a misunderstanding." I spoke for the first time. "There have been many misunderstandings." I kept my voice calm. "But they all seem to begin with you." Linda tried to explain. "I was only trying to protect Emily." "From what?" I asked. She hesitated. I thought. "No," Emily interrupted softly. "Please don't tell us what you thought." She took a slow breath. "Tell us why you kept asking about Mom's house." Linda looked from one of us to the other. No answer came. Daniel quietly slid another document across the table. It was a printed email. Emily looked at me. "I found it by accident after Aunt Linda asked me to print something from her account a few months ago. I didn't understand it then." Linda's eyes widened. The email wasn't about family. It was a conversation with a property investor discussing the approximate value of my neighborhood if several older homes were sold. My address was listed among them. No promises had been made. No sale had occurred. But it revealed something important. Linda had been thinking about my house long before she ever began questioning my memory. Tears filled Linda's eyes. "I never meant for things to go this far." I looked at my younger sister. "You didn't wake up one morning and betray us." She lowered her head. "You made small choices. One lie. Then another. Then another. Until neither of us recognized our own family anymore." She began crying quietly. I thought, if Margaret sold the house, she'd move into a smaller place. Emily would have less responsibility. Everyone would benefit. Emily shook her head slowly. You never asked what Mom wanted. Linda couldn't answer. For a long moment, no one spoke. Finally, I reached into the folder and removed the fake documents. I tore them in half. Then again. Not dramatically. Simply because they no longer deserved space in our lives. I looked at Linda. I won't spend the rest of my life being angry. She looked up hopefully. But forgiveness isn't the same as pretending nothing happened. She nodded through her tears. I understand. I forgive you. Her shoulders relaxed. But things will be different now. They should be, she whispered. After that evening, our lives changed in quiet ways. Emily started visiting every Sunday again. Sometimes we cooked together. Sometimes we worked in the garden. Sometimes we simply drank tea without saying much at all. The silence no longer felt uncomfortable. It felt peaceful. Daniel often joined us, and slowly, the house sounded like a family home again instead of an empty building. Linda respected the boundaries we set. She called before visiting. She stopped discussing money altogether. Trust didn't return overnight. It returned the same way it had once disappeared. One honest conversation at a time. Some relationships heal quickly. Others heal slowly. The important thing is that healing begins with truth. A few months later, Emily handed me a small framed photograph. It was taken years earlier on the day she graduated. She had her arm around my shoulders, and both of us were laughing at something outside the frame. She smiled. I almost let someone convince me this wasn't real. I placed the photograph back on the shelf. No one can erase a lifetime of love. She hugged me tightly. This time, there was no hesitation. No distance. Just my daughter. Looking back now, I realize betrayal doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes it arrives wearing the face of someone you've known your entire life. But I've also learned something far more important. Truth is patient. It may arrive late. It may test your faith. But when it finally stands in the light, every lie begins to lose its power. Family isn't built on perfect people. It's built on people who choose honesty, even after they've made painful mistakes. And if there's one lesson my journey taught me, it's this. Never let someone else's voice become louder than the love you've spent a lifetime proving. Thank you for listening to this emotional story. If it touched your heart, please leave a comment sharing your thoughts. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for more heartfelt family drama and real-life story-inspired journeys. Until next time, take care of yourself and the people who truly love you.